sort of custom content. Notably, there's Turtle WoW, which just got nuked with this massive lawsuit.
This time, though, it is completely different. It's a hell of a lot more dramatic, too. And the target is Turtle WoW.
This is Microsoft's legal retainer. This is a ginormous company whose sole goal is to destroy and effectively dismantle the Turtle WoW operation.
On August 29th, 2025, Blizzard Entertainment filed a lawsuit against Turtle WoW, one of the largest World of Warcraft private servers, with over 500,000 registered players worldwide. Blizzard's legal filing accused Turtle WoW of copyright infringement, racketeering, and even invoked the RICO Act, a law usually reserved for organized crime. With the bottom line being that Turtle WoW's conduct was directly competing with Blizzard's services, diverting players from their games and resulting in lost revenue for the company. Just weeks later, Blizzard followed up with a wave of cease and desist letters, most prominently against Project Epoch, a highly anticipated private server that was released just a month prior after almost 5 years of development. But what's interesting here isn't the legality of these servers. They were all clearly breaking copyright law. Now what's interesting is how something like this happened in the first place. How did these small passion projects, started by hobby programmers and modders, get so popular that they rival official releases by AAA studios in both scale, quality, and play numbers? To answer that question, we first have to go back in time.
I had no idea that one day I would be standing up here welcoming almost 8,000 people to our very first BlizzCon. We just wanted to make some great games. All of you have put your lives on hold for the next 2 days to join us in this celebration of Blizzard games and to celebrate the communities that have grown around them. We would not be here today doing what we do without your support.
The 2000s were to many the golden age of gaming. This was when the industry's biggest franchises were either born or had their breakout releases. Halo, World of Warcraft, Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty, Fallout, Elder Scrolls. Gamers were lining up for midnight releases, LAN parties were held, and players were eager for long-awaited sequels. Gaming felt exciting. Developers and game studios were seen as champions of a fast-growing gaming culture. Studios like Blizzard, Bungie, Bethesda, Infinity Ward, and Rockstar weren't just faceless corporations, they were celebrated names. In 2004, Blizzard launched World of Warcraft with a team of about 400 people, and within a year, the game had over 5 million subscribers. The same year, Bungie, with fewer than 70 developers, shipped Halo 2, breaking sales records with $125 million on day one. And just weeks later, Valve, with a team of fewer than 100 developers, released Half-Life 2, a game that set new standards for storytelling and physics in shooters, while also launching Steam, which would go on to redefine PC gaming. These were teams of passionate developers, building games they themselves wanted to play.
I think it all starts with the idea that we were our own customer and that anybody else who was going to play our games, we were in their shoes.
The 2000s game industry was operated on a fairly straightforward principle. If a game was good, it made money, and if it wasn't, it was a financial failure. Of course, there was still plenty of shovelware shipped as bundles and bargain bins, but broadly speaking, the market rewarded quality, and fun was still the main currency. But over time, publishers discovered new business models that could detach profits from quality, creating new revenue streams that weren't necessarily relying on making great games. It's time to travel back to the 2020s. Entering the 2020s, the landscape looks very different. Microtransactions, battle passes, loot boxes, and live service models are now the norm. The market strategy of trying to make good games to get good returns have largely switched to instead creating effective monetization models. to highlight just how much these companies rely on their in-game monetization. Tencent, the most profitable gaming company in the world, lost $40 billion in market value at the blink of an eye after the Chinese government implemented restrictions to microtransactions. In just the past year, we've seen controversy after controversy, and distrust in gaming companies is at an all-time high. But despite the increasing player discontent, gaming has never been more profitable. In 2024, the global video game market size was estimated at almost $300 billion and is projected to reach over $600 billion by 2030. So what's really happening here? The studios of the 2000s were able to produce beloved games that still to this day are considered high marks for their franchises, all while taking higher risks, having tighter budgets, and smaller teams. What really changed? And what are the gaming companies of today doing with these ever-increasing earnings? The answer is short and simple. They're buying. Most of the value in gaming today isn't being reinvested in new ideas or projects. It's being spent acquiring other companies. In 2021, Microsoft bought ZeniMax, owners of Bethesda, id Software, and Arcane, for $7.5 billion. In 2022, they followed up with the largest acquisition in gaming history, buying Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion. And most recently, EA agreed to be acquired by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, along with Silver Lake and Affinity Partners, in a $55 billion deal, further consolidating power over game IPs, studios, and esports. Today, all of the major franchises from the 2000s are owned by just a handful of corporations. It's the same story that's played out in almost every industry: media, banking, food, cars, tech. It's consolidation, fewer companies controlling more and more of the market. Bigger companies means more resources, bigger budgets, bigger teams, and lower risk. On the surface, it looks like progress, but the hidden cost is competition. For consumers, competition is everything. It breeds innovation, raises standards, and it keeps prices in check. But for corporations, competition is a liability. It means risk. And risk is something that successful companies have learned to buy their way out of. Because when you're the only runner in a 100-meter dash, not only is it not necessary to be the fastest or strongest, but more importantly, you always take home the gold. And this takes us to the next step. See, when companies no longer need to invest in improving their products, they start to invest in how to maximize the profits from the products they already own. Let's talk about ownership. When you buy a physical piece of media, like a book, CD, DVD, and traditionally game cartridges, that copy is yours to keep. Legally, the copyright holder's control over that particular copy ends once it's sold to you. You can keep it, lend it, resell it, preserve it, and even play it 30 years later on the same hardware. With digital media, things are very different. Most platforms don't actually sell you a copy of the game, they sell you a license. Steam says it outright. The content and services are licensed, not sold. Your license confers no title or ownership. And for Battle.net, your use of the platform is licensed, not sold. In plain terms, you don't own these games. You're paying for the right to access them under conditions set by the platform and the company. Conditions which in turn can be revoked, changed, or terminated at any time, whether you violated terms or simply because the publisher decided to remove or sunset the product. And this practice has now also started creeping into physical media. Most recently, with Nintendo updating their terms of services by including a clause that says if you violate certain parts of their license, like installing unauthorized software or modifying your console, Nintendo reserves the right to render the console and/or software permanently unusable in whole or in part. In other words, even access to your physical devices can be revoked if you stray outside what's defined as authorized use. These practices are what sparked the Stop Killing Games movement, which took hold in 2025. And the concept of players not owning the games they pay for was poignantly summed up by the popular phrase, "You will own nothing and you will like it." The phrase has its origin from an article published in 2016 by the World Economic Forum titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. It was later removed due to backlash, but can be accessed through web archives. What's a bit ironic is that the article was written in a very optimistic manner and focused on the benefits to the environment, economy, and people's overall well-being. The premise of the article is that in the future, people will live in cities where everything is rented or borrowed on demand. You don't own products like housing, cars, appliances, and so on. You simply access them when needed. And this is done through tech platforms, which in turn predicts your every need and provide them. With the trade-off being that you will have little to no privacy, since the corporations and governments would have to know all your data for it to run efficiently. The article argues that environmental waste will be reduced because production is centralized and efficient. People would have an abundance of free time due to AI taking over the workforce, and things would be next to free due to the system of renting. The article was, however, quickly interpreted more as a dystopian future, and it alluded to something that has later been described as Technofeudalism by the economist Yanis Varoufakis, a system in which we are moving away from traditional capitalism and shifting toward a new kind of economic control. The concept of technofeudalism argues that companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple are no longer competing in the market. They instead have full ownership and control over it. These tech giants create digital platforms where the users have to pay the companies to access work, social connections, entertainment, and even basic services through either leasing or renting. This emulates the economic system of medieval times, where peasants were dependent on lords and had to pay rent to access the land to farm and live. I know that all of this might sound hyperbolic and over the top, but the main message here is that we are moving away from consumer ownership and agency, and instead towards a system where companies keep consumers in a perpetual loop of payments through renting, subscriptions, and leasing, ensuring themselves a continuous revenue stream. Combine that with a consolidating market of fewer and bigger companies, removing any and all competition, and the end result will be that us, the customers, the players, will get worse products for higher prices, and inevitably we won't even own or have any control of the things we buy. But there are still great games being made. They're just not coming out from the same places where they used to. Let's talk about the indie game market. The saving grace for many gamers in the past 2 decades have been indie games, with some titles having amassed millions of players and created whole new genres like Minecraft, DayZ, and PUBG, showing that quality games can still be made and with even less resources now than ever. It could be argued that indie games are the last remains of true innovation and competition in the gaming market. These games live and die on their reputation, word of mouth, quality, and player satisfaction. And they are often started by a single or a handful of passionate developers, with the sole goal of creating something fun, interesting, and transformative, without the financial backing or incentive of a large corporation. They embody how the gaming industry started and used to be, by people who just wanted to create things, for others to play and enjoy. Or perhaps better said, in the words of the Turtle WoW developers, they are made possible by dedicated teams of passionate players and developers who loved the original vision of gaming. What we have to value here is our choice. We can choose where to spend our money and where to invest our time. We have the choice to support smaller studios, indie developers, good games, to buy physical media and to refuse to reward exploitative practices. We have the choice to not participate in these digital platforms at all. Choose hobbies and activities that involve physical media, physical art, and to buy things you own that you can transform, resell, and preserve. Because to an extent, this is just as much about preserving consumer rights as it is about preserving culture. Because if we don't own what we buy, we can't preserve it. And we can't transform it. And in a system where we are mere participants in someone else's kingdom, we can never create something to truly call our own. This isn't about political ideas or ideologies. It's about acting in your best interest. Because the bottom line is that these companies aren't. They're acting in their own. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if we don't stop supporting these practices, this will all become business as usual. And the future of gaming will be nothing we asked for, but perhaps everything we deserved.